quadruped hip CARs. So CARs stands for controlled articular rotations, and basically that's just moving the joint in its available range of motion or trying to create new motion, moving the joint in all planes. So the goal here is slow and movement only from the hip joint. Okay, so we want to prevent the spine from doing much of the movement, but that's what happens if we're limited in our hip mobility, then other areas want to take over. So our spine might want to take over if our hips are stiff, our lower spine might want to take over and have more mobility there. So we want to make sure that our hips have the mobility they need so that our muscles can function properly and the rest of our body. So hip mobility, very important. You're going to be on your hands and knees, do one side at a time. You're going to be kind of making like a rainbow with your hip. But you're going to come back into hip extension. Okay, don't go up here. Again, only the hip is moving, so you can feel your glute fire up. And you're going to rotate that hip out. Okay, you're going to your end range of motion here. And then you're going to bring that hip up into hip flexion. And then back to neutral. Then we're going to reverse it. You're going to come up into hip flexion as far as you can. Abduction, abduction of the hip as that hip comes out. Then you're going to rotate inward slowly as you come back up into that extension and back to neutral. And we're going to do the other side. Hip extension. We're rotating externally as that hip also is out into abduction. And then we're coming slowly up into hip flexion as much as you can. And back to neutral. And we're reversing up into hip flexion. Abduction, it moves out to the side. We're moving into a little bit of internal rotation here as the hip comes back up into extension and back down. So basically, all of those fancy words are just all of the different planes of motion that the hip can do. So basically, you're making kind of like a rainbow or circle with your hip, but only your hip joints are doing the motion. Okay, so try to prevent your pelvis from twisting or your back from, so I don't want to see this to get your hip motion, okay, or this as you try to get that back, that hip extension. Okay, so keep that lower back pelvis stable, just let the motion come from